I hope you're excited about this one. We have another Expert Insights session, and it's called Accessing China, a booming source of capital and innovation. And our expert for this session is Ben Wu, Healthcare Director at Agio Capital. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we have 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, I'm going to, 29 minutes, 57 seconds, I'm going to go to China and back, which is 6,753 kilometers to be specific. All right, so before that, we're going to take a quick stop in Belgium. So let me grab this. Okay, so this is Agio. This is where our company is, and we are based in Belgium. We have 3 parts. This is just so that you roughly know what we do. We are a legal firm, right? We are also an audit firm. And the third part is Agio Capital, where we work. And that's, of course, is the most important piece. And most of our work is related to China and Belgium, or China and Europe. So we help companies find licensing partner, finding capital, funding, co-development. So that's one piece of work. And since the end of last year, we also become an investor. So we help company develop their business in China, doing a joint venture with them, help them grow and land in China. So that's a different story. We're not gonna be talking about that today. Okay, so very quickly, a personal story, always a good way to start. You see, this is, maybe I'll do a very quick show of hands. How many of you have been to China? Almost everybody, okay. So, in Shanghai? Okay, so the only place you've been to China is Shanghai. Okay, so when you look at this picture, it depends on when you are there, you would recognize that this is the left-hand side, your left-hand side is what Shanghai looks like today. And there's a river in between, and this bright, shiny place is called Pudong, is the business district of Shanghai. On the right-hand side is actually the old Shanghai, which is, not talking about that picture, but to the right-hand side of the Pudong is the old Shanghai where Shanghai is. The other picture was taken about 30 years ago. 30 years ago. That was when I graduated MBA, first time set foot in Shanghai. And as you can see, there is nothing across there in Pudong. You see the picture? There's nothing there, right? So a main attraction at that time for our MBA, post-MBA tour was to take us into a room and show us a big model 30 years ago of what it's gonna look like today. And in 30 years, this is what it looks like. So this actually I guess, a picture of how quickly China has grown, all the mistakes it has made, all the craziness. But when you go visit Shanghai, it's a very bright, shiny place. Okay, so the left-hand side is what most people think about China, right? Lots of bicycle and old China. Right? So in 30 years, it becomes one of the places with a lot of the high-tech toys. All right, so China has one of the best, fastest, high-speed rail in the world. Since last year, China has certified its first passenger commercial aircraft, all made in China, only last year, like the C919. And it's making the next model now. And then, of course, the electric vehicle get reported a lot in the news. You know about that story. And then the latest toy is the drone taxi. So that's how it is. So I think when you think about China, think about leapfrogging. Leapfrogging is you started low, but because you started late, you skip a lot of the things that normally, all the mistakes that other countries have made, other continents may have to make. And then you go into the latest high-tech toys, right? So this is actually, I think, basically the same thing when we talk about healthcare in China. So coming back to what we're interested in, this picture on the left, about even 10 years ago, at most 15 years ago, Chinese hospital, because there is no private sector, it's all public sector hospitals. There is no clinic. Everybody goes to hospital. Everybody wants to go to the best hospital. So it's ultra packed when you go into those hospitals. Craziness, like people pushing each other a little bit. When you go into a hospital today, you don't see that at all because everything is electronic. Right? So people on their mobile can schedule appointments and even do tests and all that. So there's a lot of telemedicine now, e-healthcare now. And what has happened from this picture to that picture is a lot of investment. A lot of investment. You look at the top right-hand picture, you see all the big name hospitals in the US are in China in one way or another. You look at that map, it's all US. Right? So all the big names that you know, the Cleveland Clinic and the Mass General, they're all there. They're all there, right? And then you can see that the capital markets really has rewarded a lot of that with very high valuation. All these are e-healthcare companies. So behind the innovation is capital. Behind the capital is a lot of people who want to chase the capital. So if you look at the market itself, despite what people say, is still growing strong. So you consider 7-8% of a 1.4 billion people market that looks for better healthcare. I don't think it's going to stop here. Right? But you can think about, if you are the Chinese government, you need to cater healthcare to a lot of people. Just like I think in Europe and the US, we need to look at affordability. Right? So you see the VBP. Right? So the VBP is volume-based purchasing, which is price negotiation. So since that time, since 2018, there is price negotiation and therefore slowed down a little bit, but it's going to pick up again. The market is going to be there, right? But more structured, more controlled, right? So a lot of engines still going. I'm not going to talk about it. You can have the slides if you like. There's a lot of details. But in terms of the engine, I think the most important point to remember is it's not going to stop here, right? Despite what you hear, what you see in the news. Okay, this is a very interesting picture of how the capital market looks at it. This is MSCI index, and just in 2008 to 2014-ish, there is not much of a movement. It's pretty much a generic market. Until 2015, something momentous happened in China is that they have adopted a guy in the regulatory department who was an FDA regulator before. So they have adopted a lot of the FDA policies and making access of the drug a lot easier. Right? So access meaning you do not need to redo phase 2 trial in China. You can submit your NDA based on phase 3 that are generated outside of China. Now, the cost suddenly lowers a lot. And then after that, what happened is that, well, there is the opening of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, something called 18A, Chapter 18A, allowing company to go listed pre-revenue. Right? So that's the first time that in an Asian stock exchange, companies can list pre-revenue. And because of that, attracted a lot of returnee Chinese who have been working in multinational, the Pfizer, the GSK, the Roche of the world, back to China. So you have these overseas researchers, you have the capital going, you have the much better regulatory environment. So what happens? What happens? And then, of course, 2021 is where the whole globe, I think, we're going into some sort of a bubble of frenzy of the market. So post-2021, which I didn't show here, is of course the same as everywhere else. There is a crash to some extent, but I think it's just going to be a period of time where capital is finding what's the next thing to do. Right? So I think we have the full confidence it's going to recover. And when you look at the next few slides, you make up your own mind how it's going to recover, and you can tell me. Okay. So the first, if you look at China over the last 20 years, you started off with pretty much a generic market because there is no availability. Now, I joined Sanofi in Shanghai about 15 years ago. When I joined, the China market was still, when you have a cancer, when you need an oncology product, is completely not reimbursed, not covered. You're on your own. Today, almost all new drugs are covered to some extent. Right, so a lot has happened in the last 20 years, access-wise, regulatory-wise. So patients are going to demand more and more, right? So that goes from the generic drug phase into the catch-up phase, where you saw that picture. Capital was, there was a lot of frenzy going on with capital, heavy investment in R&D. There was looking into the latest innovation. They were acquiring foreign companies, acquiring foreign licenses. And we are, I think now, is somewhere between this second phase and the third phase where China can become a global player, right? So when you look at China, we look at PD-1, PD-L1. I think the last time I looked at it, there was 26 programs going on with PD-L1 alone. So it can go into some craziness. It can go overboard, right? But this is not planned. This is because of capital behind it. Right, so every GP will be questioned by their LPs on how come your fund doesn't have one of those hot items on the portfolio. Right? So every GP has to find a company that has one of these hot items, and therefore these craziness sometimes happen. But when you look at China today, it pretty much has everything. It has gene therapy, it has all kinds of things that you can think about. Right? Oh, antibodies, of course. Okay, so this slide pretty much tells you the same thing, that it goes from stages to stages, from the generic drug to the latest innovation. So it's all there. It is all there. This just came out a couple days ago in Financial Times. It says, Western companies drive Chinese biotech license deal blitz. Last year was the first year when one of these multinationals started to buy up or acquire a Chinese-based biotech. And there were three or four deals just within the last few months. So it tells you the quality level it has reached. All right? So it may not be the most innovative stuff, but the quality is good. All right? So you can see from generic to I'm trying to do me too, I'm trying to do me better. Multinational was happy to pick them up. Right? Okay, so last year was also the first year where there is more out-licensing out of China than in-licensing into China. Because the graph doesn't tell you that, because the graph also has deals in between Chinese companies. So it messed up the picture a little bit. But when you also only look at overseas deals, there are more out-license than in-license, meaning that's the quality has reached a certain level, where other companies are willing to acquire Chinese innovation. Okay. So I think it comes to, oh, what do I care? That's Chinese market, right? But when we think about what are the opportunities there, we have to realize where are their strengths, where are the weakness, what product we can produce to supplement what our partner, what our client wants. So China now has a very good ecosystem in building, manufacturing biotech items. Right? It has one of the best CROs in the world. FDA has office in China, if you don't know that, just to make sure that the quality of the trials are there. But what's lacking in China is the original innovation and the ability to translate the original innovation into a product. So all the latest stuff that you see, like PD-1 to PD-L1, not invented in China. But once it's in China, it can modify, it can do very nice things to it, but it just doesn't have that ability to come up with, or not yet, with real innovation or the translational medicine. So you go to a university in China, it doesn't really have a very capable translational office in the university, which, of course, in Europe is very established. In the US, it's even more established, like very commercial-minded, but not yet in China. So looking at that, where's the opportunity? So you look at the left-hand side, there's a McKinsey graphic there. I think it basically tells you that story, right? So China is good at clinical development, it's good at manufacturing, good at affordable innovation, right? Because it's the third, fourth iteration, it's become cheaper and cheaper. It has a very good level of regulatory integration right now. Right? So the file that are required to file in China is the same as what you need in EMA and FDA. And what is lacking is the research and discovery that we just talked about. Okay? So why are we, if we're thinking about licensing to China, why do we do that? Well, licensing basically give you undiluted or non-diluted cash for the Greater China rights. So usually it's bundled up Greater China, meaning mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, may or may not include Taiwan sometimes. Right? So that's the licensing, non-diluted cash, which will help you maybe use that cash to develop other compounds. So who are you talking to? You should be talking to Chinese medtech, biotech companies, right? But they are now also facing some kind of a cash crunch because of the lack of deals in the last year or so. Right? And what is coming up, which was not there before, was the Chinese traditional pharma. So you remember the generic companies that we talked about? They are still there. But they are cash rich. But they are now facing a price cut on their old products, and they desperately need new development, new products into that portfolio. So that becomes suddenly a new venue to out-license to. The issue is they are old generic companies. They are old Chinese traditional medical companies. So if you try to explain what your latest technology to them, it could be a blank. So remember that. Different audience, different way to talk to them. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. So so the best timing is probably phase 2, when you're thinking about going into phase 3, because you remember we talked about if you already have Chinese patients in the trial, you don't need to repeat that trial in China for China market or China submission. So if you have about 20% of your patients being Chinese, it could be Chinese recruited from Europe plus Chinese recruited in China, about 20%, then you can speed up your registration in China without the huge investment of redoing the whole trial in China. Right? So best time is when you are in phase 2, thinking or planning phase 3. That's the best time. So you start talking to your potential partner around that time. Right, so for this, in China, of course, speed of recruitment. We were talking about rare disease in China today, chatting about that. There are more rare disease patients in China. It's no longer rare if you have that kind of number in a Western country. So speed of recruitment for sure. And what kind of patients? A lot of them are treatment-naive patients, which you cannot get, not easily get in Western market because they have already been treated with a lot of other treatments. But China has that. Right? So it gives you very good opportunity for recruitment, speeds up your recruitment. Lower manufacturing costs, we talked about very good CDMOs, CROs in China, global standards, supplies. The world, many of us have heard about WuXi AppTec, WuXi Biologics. They supply a lot of the raw ingredients for clinical trial as well as commercial products. And of course, for China market entry, because you don't need to repeat trials, it's a lot faster. Okay, right. So if you look at from 2021 to 2023, what has happened, Well, China is a bit more accepted because they're more willing to look at early stage compounds to license in. It used to be more phase 3, phase 4, but there are only so much phase 3, phase 4 out there, and there are lots of competition, right? So between Chinese companies for those assets. So they're now more willing to go a little bit earlier, and of course it's more risky, and you have to find a way to explain to them why your early stage compound is better, because there's not a lot of data to go by, and of course there is always their management pushing back a little bit on what their BD team is proposing, but in general there is a willingness to go earlier, and there's a willingness to go broader. So it used to be a lot of oncology product. Now they're more willing to go into CNS, neurology, different therapeutic areas. Okay? So broader, deeper, earlier, yes. Okay. So when we talk about funding, if you're not looking for a partner yet, and you're only looking for funding, well, available to you are the global VCs. Right? So the Sequoia, the Hill House that you know, the OrbiMed that we talked about earlier today. These funds all have offices in China. So they're global funds. They have office in the US, New York, whatever. They have office in China, but they are different funds. They may be under the same company, but they're operating differently and separately and independently. So they have different mandates. The ones that are operating in China only looks at Chinese potential investments. Right? So if you have already talked to OrbiMed US, you should also talk to OrbiMed China, because they are different teams. They don't always communicate. Right? Those are global players, global investors, very sophisticated. They know what they're talking about. Right? They know the science very well. They will ask very intelligent questions. But I think this is global. We know that they're now taking a little bit more time, more careful, more to choose from, no different from anywhere else. But there are also some new things going on, is that, well, the government continues to want to fund, more grants available now than before. Right? We talk about a lot of local VCs, which were not so much into the scene, are now appearing. But those are RMB-based funds. So you need to be careful on, well, if you're looking for direct investment, they can't do that. If you're looking for co-development, yes, that's possible. If you have some trial in China, you're running on RMB funds, that can be possible. Right? Corporate VCs, CVCs. Corporate VCs are the ones that we're just talking about. The generic company, the traditional Chinese medicine company, they now have the money and the willingness to fund and look for collaboration. Okay, one other thing. The Chinese VCs are very unlikely to take a lead position. Why? I think partly because their ability to assess compound. Right? So they want to have a big institution taking the lead and they follow. Right? That's safer for them. So that's actually pretty common. If you ask a lot of funds, they're less willing to take a lead position in China. But that's part of the validation that you need to come up with. If you're already talking to multinational companies, you have a big investors behind you, that's a plus. And the emerging source of capital, we already talked about. Yes, direct equity investment, not very likely. But they look for potential co-development, collaboration, all kinds of different deals, including joint ventures. Right? So there are different ways to work with them. So don't think about simple licensing alone. There are other ways to work with the different partners. Okay, so we need to sum it up. So basically, when you look at the market as a whole, Chinese market is still very attractive. Right? 1.4 billion population, the demand for health is only going to go up, and they want better, probably more expensive stuff. Right? So, and also there's this Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou that you know, but there are also second, third, fourth, fifth tier cities, and the demand's gonna keep growing for many, many more years. But the environment is a bit more complex. So if you want to go into China, I suggest you consider going in with a partner. That takes away a lot of headaches. Of course, it can also bring you headache, but that's another topic. Fundraising. So we talk about the traditional funds, global funds. Consider the China arm separate from their US or European arm. They are separate funds. So the US fund says no doesn't mean the China fund is going to say no. Right? They're all US dollar, euro-based funds. And we talked about validation being important. Yeah, validation means, well, I have a big partner, I got this award, I have a big investors behind me. That's important, right? And co-development, if you think of just want to do something simple, yes, out-licensing would be what you can look for. But like previous speaker says, you have to find the right partner. You have to find the right partner. And you can also consider joint venture, co-development, different modes of collaboration. Make use of the CDMO, the CROs in China. They're actually really good quality. Price is competitive. Okay, I think that's all. I'm sure trying to cover China in 30 minutes, and we're back here into Sweden. Okay. If you want to look for us, we actually do a little promo here. We just published this book a few weeks ago. It talks about all the stuff that I just told you, so you don't need to buy it. Okay.
Well,
yes. Okay, so that's all. Thank you,
Ben.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we'll jump straight into the next company presentation, which is Chordate Medical. And here to present the company is CEO Anders Weilandt. Welcome, Anders.
Thank you, Mike. All right, let's switch over to a little bit of an exotic refreshment and non-molecule company. We're medtech, and in this case, we're medtech in the form of prevention of chronic migraine. Of course, a chronic migraine or a migraine patient can be perfectly happy with its current standard of care and medication. But several studies suggest that above 50% of them are really not. There is a constant search for something else. And sometimes also a search for a non-pharma solution. And reason being that pain medication in general, as you may know, loses effect over time sometimes, and you have to switch to something else. Side effect profiles on these drugs are from time to time quite unbearable. And that is another reason. If you're pregnant or would like to become pregnant, many of these migraine drugs are not really for you. So there is a huge population of patients that are looking for something else together with their physician or doctor. And then what to do? That is the question. What we do at Chordate is exactly that. We offer an alternative, a non-drug alternative for all these chronic patients of migraine. And that's a lot. So I'm here. I'm proud to be able to have this opportunity, thanks to BioStock, to present to you Osilia, our beautiful product. My name is Anders Weilandt, and I've been the CEO of this company since the summer of 2017. So maybe a little brush up of what is migraine. A lot of people, this is about the number of chronic migraineurs. And what is chronic migraine? Well, it's defined as having 15 days of headache per month, whereof 8 episodes of migraine. Quite severe. A little bit of show of hands, how many have had migraine or have migraine? Yes, that's a good representation. So you know what we're talking about. All the rest of us, you probably know someone that has, right? And the reason is that there are quite a few, actually. 15% about in the world. 1 out of 7 have migraine or have had migraine somewhere in their life. 2% again are chronic migraineurs. The rest we usually call episodic migraineurs. And this is actually definitely a women's health issue because 2/3 of all patients are women. It's also very costly to society. There is a relatively recent health economic study from Norway and Sweden suggesting about 11,000 euros per year an average chronic patient. 80% being productivity loss and 20% is healthcare and medicines. So a huge issue. So what do we do? And what is Osilia? Well, besides being a non-pharma solution, it's also safe and effective. It is well tolerated and it's easy to perform. A typical Osilia patient needs to come into a clinic 4 times a year in average for a treatment that takes about 30 minutes in and out the door. And it's also a nurse procedure. So it's a low-cost procedure for the clinic. It is preventive, as our latest RCT have shown. Also showing a very nice and almost non-existing side effect profile. And also the effectiveness that then generates this low cost for the clinic. So how does it work? What does it do? Very simple technology. You dress the patient appropriately. Once that is done, you insert a thin balloon catheter in one of the nostrils carefully, and you fix that with a headband and a clamp to prevent anyone to have to hold the catheter for 10 plus 10 minutes. You do the treatment 10 minutes in each nostril. And once that is done, the magic starts because you press start, and from now on the procedure is automatic and the staff can do something else meanwhile. So the machine runs for 10 minutes, then prompts the user to switch over to the other nostril, and it runs for another 10, and that's it. This is, of course, the first minute, a little bit of awkwardness. It can be feeling funny and sometimes actually hurt a little bit, but that passes really fast. The second time the patient comes in for treatment, they quite often fall asleep because it's a nice vibration that this balloon generates that is soothing. So they close their eyes and doze off quite often. Usually we have a starting procedure recommended that you do 1 treatment per week in 6 weeks as a loading dose. And then it's very individual, but the patient usually wants to come back every 2nd or 3rd month, approximately. And sometimes patients go for half a year before they need to come back again. So compare that to having to take daily drugs or daily injections or monthly injections with some of the other alternatives. So, can we prove this? Yes, we can. Even at the side of medtech, we have to do proper clinical studies nowadays, as you might know. In order to register products, we have to show efficacy, we have to show safety, and we have to show that the claims we make are true. And we have a pipeline cleared for that. Our pivotal study, the PM007, gave us the CE mark and is now the basis for our marketing and sales. Fantastic results. We're going to dive into them a little bit. Right now we have 2 active studies. One is 009 and 010. The first one there is a short pilot where we are looking at CGRP non-responders. CGRP is the most expensive version of migraine treatment. And at the end of that, there is a lot of patients that doesn't respond. And at that situation, they don't really have any more options. So that's what we study, see if we have some effect. The 010 is a post-market surveillance study, 200 patients, we follow them for 1 year. The 007, the maximum effect shown in the active arm was 4.3 days reduced of headache and 4.9 days with migraine reduced. And the study report says 2.7 respectively and 2.9 for migraine days when you look at the therapeutic gain. So that's a huge success for us, have helped us enormously and still does. Huge market, as you saw already. We have the fortune here to have an extremely good benchmark, and that is Botox treatment for migraine. Also done 4 times a year, 30-minute procedure basically in and out the door, a clear side effect profile, and very nice price for us to compare with. But we have a much better side effect profile as we don't have any, more or less. And we are priced a little less than Botox. And as you can see, the projected market is with a fantastic growth, and the Botox segment here is really pronounced. So why would you invest in this company and own shares, as we're listed on Nasdaq First North? Well, we have a clear strategy for how to provide a return on investment, and that's by exit. This is an exit case, and we have communicated that for over 5 years now. We're at the final stage here. We're building proof of concept in market, and we do that by addressing a few selected markets where we try to focus all our small resources. You see them on the left. USA is notably not a target for us, but we do run a FDA clearance project there. China is handled by our JV partner, so we're not really involved in that. And what I want by coming here, looking at the time, we have 3 bubbles. We're looking to engage a broader industry network. We're looking to attract institutional investors because we are at that time right now where I think that could be good for us. And we would like to connect with strategic partners to help us with the last step of our strategy. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So I'm looking at some of the questions I'm getting here. Do you have to be experiencing an active migraine episode when getting Osilia treatment, or is it done prophylactically?
This should preferably not be done when you have a migraine episode. So this should be scheduled as a preventive treatment. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a good combination to have an active attack.
Right. No, you wouldn't want something.
No, that will just worsen the situation, I think.
Yeah. What is the strongest part of your exit strategy right now?
The strongest part. Mm-hmm. Fantastic question. I have no idea. The whole the part of the strategy is that we have built it in clear steps. Good foundation technology-wise, good R&D, good regulatory, good clinical proof, and now we're trying to build the market proof. MedTech, in our experience, needs that. We need to show it's sellable, and we need to show that we can gain a growing number of patients that wants the treatment. That is what the buyer would look for, in our view.
How about some of the challenges, especially with the regulatory framework? What are some of the biggest challenges there?
Not much. I mean, this is a very simple technology. In terms of patient risk, there is really not much to talk about. This is still a MDD product, and that will run us to 28. So for now, we're cool regulatory-wise. We do have an ongoing issue with the Chinese FDA, which hopefully we can overcome here. They are really interesting to learn how they work.
Will you be talking to Ben later?
I might.
One last question. You mentioned the challenges with the Chinese FDA. Are you aware of any other regional challenges in target markets?
Come again?
What are some other regional challenges that?
Regional challenges. Yeah. Migraine as such, we do have another indication of chronic rhinitis with the same technology, by the way. That was the start of the company. But migraine is well evenly spread around the globe. It projects the same set of issues for healthcare and society. So the regional challenges for us are generic, the reimbursement, for instance, acceptance processes, adaptability into healthcare systems. Those varies tremendously, and there are any height of barriers, sometimes unbearable barriers, and we have to work somewhere else. That's why we select these markets, because we have assumed that we have an easier way in some of them, and some we just skip, like Sweden.
Well, I'm sure people will have questions about that as well. But unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Andreas, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Well, next up we have Iconovo, and here to present the company is CFO Henrik Simonsen. Welcome, Henrik.
Thank you. Like Ben said, he was focusing on the Chinese region and Flanders. We are based here, Iconovo, in Medican Village and Medican Valley, which is one of these vibrant regions in Europe. As you can see here, we have other clusters, of course, in Cambridge, but this region is actually pretty strong. And we have about 30 people. And you can see the management team up here comprising 6 people, including our founder, Oris Laszlo. Quite experienced in inhalation and commercial management in general. The history of the company is that it's based on inhalers, which got the company started back in 2016. The company IPO'd in 2018. We built further capabilities in terms of formulation and analysis. And more recently, we have added biological substances, which are a little bit more difficult to work with in inhalation. As you can see in the bottom, we also have quite a few collaborators and partners around the world, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. You can see here on a map the partners we have. We have partners in the US in terms of Amneal. We have partners in Korea in terms of BNC. We work with Intas in India, and we have 2 collaborators in Australia, namely Monash and Ina Respiratory. And then we have some of the local heroes that we are collaborating with. Arcete Pharma that works on a new asthma COPD drug. We have Kiox in Denmark, which works on more rare lung diseases. And we're working with Affilogic in France that works on the nanophytins, let's call a smaller version of monoclonal antibodies. So a local base, but a global reach to partners. The platforms we have, you can see here, we have got started with EcoRes, is the name of this inhaler that you see to the left. It's a copy, not an exact copy, but a near copy of Astra's Turbohaler. Further to the right, you see EcoPre, which is a copy of Glaxo's best-selling Ellipta device, which is one of the best-selling asthma COPD medicines globally. And then we have a copy type product of Novartis' Breezhaler called IcoCap. And then we have the very unique device EcoOne or EcoOne Nasal. The EcoOne Nasal is a respiratory, the world's first respiratory-driven single-dose inhaler. It can take up to 50 milligrams of powder, and it's very low priced in terms of manufacturing costs. So it's a very attractive device that also gets a lot of attention when we present at the various conferences. We are very strong positioned in the market. We are one of the few global leaders that work in providing complete inhalation products. So we enable pharma companies to do complex medicine for dry powder inhalation, which is what we focus on. And we portray ourselves as a capital-light CDMO. And as I said, we have 3 strong competencies. We have the platforms, we have the formulation capabilities, and we have analysis of compounds as well. We work with quite a few other companies, both in this region, like Truly Labs, Magle, Galenica, and Amaze, but then we have partners in Europe in general, and Germany, and so on. So we sit in the middle as a spider and work with a lot of collaborators around us. The pipeline you see up here, it's quite a broad pipeline. EcoRes, we are working there, as I said before, with Amneal to make that progress further in development. On EcoPre, we have teamed up with an investment bank, Stifel, to help us find a partner, and that process is ongoing right now. And then we have the partners that I just described before, in terms of BNC, in terms of Monash, and the others that I just mentioned. The business plan, if you will, is what you see up here. We have different business areas. We have generics that we can develop into new inhaled medicines. We have novel pharmaceuticals, which breaks into 2 segments. The novel pharmaceuticals, either biologics or new chemicals, or reformulated projects. And that is one very good example with the Danish Kiox, where we work with a reformulation of an existing product that goes into a very rare lung disease called ILD, abbreviated. We have different models. We work either as an inhalation CDMO. We work to strike license development agreements, or we can have direct sales in terms of inhalers, the 4 platforms that I talked about just before. We have set out to specifically exploit the 2 opportunities you see here in blue, which are reformulated or new substances, and I can give you an example of this in a short while. We're strongly positioned in a growing market. Of course, asthma COPD continues to grow handsomely. The dry powder market is roughly 15 billion, growing at a compound growth rate of 7%. But the segment, which comprises what we label new indications, grows a bit faster than that. And this is because inhalers or new products and medicines are coming in the inhaled form. You see that in cystic fibrosis, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and pulmonary hypertension. But you also see inhalation products starting to come into the CNS space, such as depression and migraine. And more recently, you've actually seen a very old product, glucagon, developed as an inhaled product, and it's actually starting to outbeat the old injectable glucagon products. So quite an interesting opportunity for us as a company. And we have sent out a press release about 2 weeks ago that we are targeting in Italy GLP-1 as a reformulated product. We are also looking into developing tyrosine kinase inhibitors, which work very well in non-small lung cancer as tablets, but there may be an opportunity also to look into inhaled TKIs to get a better control of the disease. And lastly, you can see our financial targets. We have set out targets for 2027, and that is to reach 250 million in sales, of which half is to come in as earnings or EBITDA. We've also said that we hope to break even in 2026 and hope to have a profitable quarter in 2024 and 2025. So this is the company in a nutshell.
Great, thank you so much, Henrik, for the presentation. So here someone is asking, you have a pipeline that is, they have quite the pipeline for a fairly small company. Do you see any risks with that?
There's always a risk, you can say, that the collaborators will slow development or return products to the collaborators such as us. So I think that's the main risk with some of the collaborators we have. And then there is a financial risk to some of the collaborators we have. They may run into problem attracting and getting funding or financing, and this is what we have experienced for some of the collaborators we work with. Some are also work based on grants, and grant money may be less available to some of our partners. So that's, you can say, the collaboration risk in itself, and then there's a financial risk in general.
What's your strategy to try to mitigate those risks?
In terms of the financial risk, we've actually set up a program called Iconovo Accelerator, where we help smaller companies to attract grant money from EU. And in general, we try to support our partners as good as we can. But of course, we cannot provide funding to our partners. I mean, they have to get their money themselves.
Sure. There's an interesting question here about your latest announcement, the project regarding the inhaled GLP-1 agonist. Could you talk a little bit more about this project's potential?
Well, it's easy to say that it has a huge potential because the market as such is growing quite rapidly. But we see it as an opportunity to come up with an inhaled product because the current market is largely comprised of injectable products. There is a tablet-based version of GLP-1, but the bioavailability of the tablet or GLP-1 in a tablet is very, very low. So we think we can come in with an inhaled product with a pretty good bioavailability, which may be quite attractive for some patients that don't want to use needles as such.
Sure. Are there specific markets you would target with this strategy?
I think obesity is the obvious one, of course, but
I mean regional markets.
Sorry?
I mean regional markets. Any specific regional markets?
I think obesity, if we target that, is a global phenomenon, so I don't think there's a specific region that is more eligible for this type of treatment than any other.
Speaking of financial risk, what's your plan to achieve profitability?
The plan, as I laid out in the last slide, is to break even in 2026. That's been a clear statement from the company for I think 1 or 2 years now. So I don't think we will. I don't think we will reach profitability until then. And what we promised for 26 is break even. We'll be real profitable in 2027 when some of the pipeline products that I highlighted will be launched in the market, and we will start to receive royalties from those products.
Well, the questions keep rolling in here. We have a little bit more time. With pricing and access becoming tougher for non-innovative, slightly better products, I'm just reading off the panel here, how do you balance this against your offering?
If we are getting what, sorry?
With pricing and access becoming tougher for non-innovative or slightly better products, how do you balance this against your offering?
I'm not sure how to answer that one. I mean, we're generally, faced with competition from generics. So that's the whole thing, and the whole idea of the company is to exploit those opportunities. That when products go generic, we can come with a new branded version with our inhalers. So I think it's exact that challenge, if you will, or opportunity that we are addressing with our strategy.
What would you say is the strongest part of your business model?
Well, the strongest part is the competencies that the company holds, because we are one of the very few companies that actually do inhalers. We have very strong knowledge in formulation and analysis, and there aren't that many companies that do this. So if you want to work in inhalation, then you should come work with Iconovo.
All right. Let me see here. Okay, there is someone who is really pushing for the profitability aspect of this. How do you reach profitability specifically? Can you be very specific about that?
Well, I can't be more specific than what I've said. It will be a combination of license income, and it will be a combination of royalties and possibly also milestone payments, but I can't be more specific than that.
Fair enough. Okay, finally, where do you hope Iconovo will be 3 years from now?
I'm hoping we will have the first products launched in the market, and I hope we will have a well-advanced reformulated product that we can out-license or talk with partners.
Great. Well, we'll catch up in 3 years, and we'll see.
Surely. Forward.
Thank you so much, Henrik, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, well, next I'd like to welcome to the stage EpiEndo Pharmaceuticals and CEO Maria Bech. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much. So I'm the only one holding you off from coffee, so hopefully it will work out anyway. So my name is Maria Bech. I'm the CEO of EpiEndo. I'm Swedish, but living in Denmark and working for an Icelandic company. EpiEndo was founded back in 2014. And there we have our headquarters in Reykjavik, Iceland, but we also have labs in Iceland with the university and in Sweden in Solna. And then a few of us sits outside in the UK, or me in Denmark. So what are we all about? Well, we are developing an oral drug for COPD. It's called EP395. COPD, as you might know, is the third leading cause of death globally, and there is a huge unmet need. What we are working with is a non-antibiotic macrolide, and I'll come back to that. But the macrolide azithromycin is the basis for our research, and that is already validated with efficacy in the clinic. We are phase 2B ready. We have a clear positioning after inhalers, but before biologics. And this is a multi-billion opportunity, and we believe we have an exit within 5 years. So just talking about COPD, third leading cause of death globally. The market is huge. The economic burden is estimated to be 4.8 trillion in 2030. The market is growing, and it's estimated to be $30 billion in 2033. And we believe that our case actually could have a peak sales around $5 billion when we get on the market. But we don't, and that is for COPD, I should say. But we don't only have COPD. We can also see a future in asthma and in bronchiectasis, also huge markets. And what is EP395 all about? Well, it started back in 2014 when the founder looked at what was published around azithromycin, the antibiotic, and COPD, and that it significantly reduces exacerbations in COPD with up to 50%. Several publications came out, but it also came out that a lot of these patients experienced increased macrolide resistance, antibiotic resistance, and that is, as you know, something you want to avoid. So what EpiEndo is based on is that we take the azithromycin, remove the antibiotic effects from azithromycin, but keep the positive effects that actually keeps avoids the exacerbations, the anti-inflammatory effects, the epithelial effects. And we have created a group of molecules we call the bariolides, and we have a strong IP and freedom to operate for those. And our lead project is called EP395. And EP395 has in the preclinical shown anti-inflammatory effects, not only with neutrophilic but also eosinophilic inflammation. And that is important in COPD. Asthma is an eosinophilic inflammation. COPD is a mainly neutrophilic inflammation, but you can also have eosinophilic inflammation. And corticosteroids treats the eosinophilic part. We have shown both effects in neutrophilic and eosinophilic inflammation. We also shown that we have effects on the epithelium and on macrophages. In phase 1A that we completed in 2021, we did see that we could go up as high as 750 milligram in a single dose and 375 for 28 days. But I think the most important results we got from this is that we don't have any hearing problems. And the reason for me saying that is that in the label for azithromycin, it is reported that they have experienced hearing problems. And we have shown in this study that we don't have that. We also recently, or last year, did a proof of pharmacology study. This study is mimicking one of the preclinical studies we have done. an LPS challenge model. And for those of you working with inflammation, know what it is. LPS is like a bacterial infection. And if you give mice in the preclinical setting an LPS challenge, you get an inflammation. And our drug then reduces inflammation in the mice model. Now we wanted to see if that is the same for patients, or healthy volunteers, I should say. So we pre-treated healthy volunteers for 3 weeks, gave them an LPS challenge and measured biomarkers. And we could see that what we do is that we reduce inflammation, but we also enhance the epithelial immunological barrier. We create a host defense response. We have also conducted a phase 2A study in COPD patients. This was a 12-week study conducted in Germany and in the UK. A primary objective was safety tolerability. We can see that we are safe and better safety than azithromycin because we don't have any GI effects like azithromycin. They are both an antibiotic and affect motilin receptors. We do not. We did not see any GI effects. And we had no adverse events around hearing. When it comes to efficacy, we looked at biomarkers, and we did see anti-inflammatory effects on biomarkers, similar to what has been reported in short-term studies for azithromycin. So with this, I should also add what we have done as well is a drug-drug interaction study showing that we are unlikely to result in drug interactions. We may be a victim, we might need to lower the dose in the future when we have potent inhibitors, but not a big problem. And this was actually our IND opening study. But just to show you in comparisons, azithromycin versus EP395, our lead project. We know from the preclinical setting that we both reduce inflammation and that we have barrier effects or epithelial effects. We both know in short-term clinical studies that we reduce inflammation on the inflammatory biomarkers. We have shown for EP395, which is not known yet for azithromycin, that we also have this host defense response, that we actually trigger the body to support in defending towards challenges, bacteria, infections, and so forth. And then azithromycin has already proven that they reduce exacerbations. We have not yet proven that, but being so similar, having the similar effects and so forth, we believe that when we go into an exacerbation study, we will reduce exacerbation at least to the same extent. What we have done more is to prepare for a phase 2B. We need to do chronic, because a phase 2B study will be a long study. So we need to have chronic tox studies. Those are completed. We have completed a 9-month dog and a 6-month rat study with a NOAL that makes us be able to move further into the clinic. And we have a tablet available. We have used capsules up until now. And for the future, and what we're planning now is a larger phase 2B study. It will be over 1,000 patients treated for a year at least. But we're also looking into the dose range prior to entering into this study. And we have a very prominent scientific advisory board that has supported us in this and has endorsed us moving further. And for those of you working in respiratory, I think you know that these are all the big names out there, with Professor Clive Page being chairman of the scientific advisory board, but also Professors Barnes, Chelly, Martinez, Vidisha, and Singh. So what are we thinking about exit? Well, we are out looking for funding now to be able to conduct our phase 2B study. We think that will take a few years to complete those, but we see a clear endpoint there and an M&A possibility or an IPO. Because having a proof of concept exacerbations in a large population should be interesting for big pharma partners. After that, moving into phase 3, and we think we could be on the market in 2034. Our IP is valid until 2042, and as I mentioned before, we estimate the peak sales to be around $5 billion. So really big market out there. So what is the competitive advantage of EP395? Well, we think we have a clear positioning on top of standard care. Patients who continue to exacerbate when there are bronchodilators or on triple therapy, they could go on to EP395. We are agnostic with the type of inflammation. If they have high eosinophilic inflammation, they can go on EP395. If they have neutrophilic inflammation, they can go on EP395. And we do believe we have a clear positioning prior to biologics. I think the advantage we have here is we're an oral drug. Mainly today's treatment are inhalers. The ones that are coming are injectables. We think we have a clear positioning after the inhalers before the biologics. And being an oral drug means tablets, mean lesser package, means lower cost productions, less transportation and storage costs because we're not as bulky as the other drugs, or can be in room temperature. We foresee that we will be a safe drug. As I mentioned before, we don't see the GI problems. We don't have the hearing problems that is associated with azithromycin. Pneumonia is a common side effect with inhaled corticosteroids. We don't foresee that. The currently available oral drug roflumilast, which is a PD3, PD4 inhibitor, has also CNI and GI effects. We don't foresee that. So we do expect to be a safe drug moving forward. And we should reduce exacerbations, as we know azithromycin does, improve quality of life, and also reduce inflammation. And we've heard from our key opinion leaders that this really could be a game changer with our ICS sparing potential. So the take-home message, why should you invest in EP395? Well, it's clinically validated. We have seen similar efficacy as azithromycin have, and we know azithromycin reduce exacerbations. We do have effects on host defense response and are anti-inflammatory. And we have seen at least the same efficacy as azithromycin, and should probably be able to reduce exacerbations. We are an oral drug. We are bringing an oral drug into a mainly inhaled market, and we do have the clear positioning before biologics. And we have a de-risk project. We have gone through phase 1b and phase 2a. We have the drug interaction studies completed. We have completed the tox studies. We have a tablet formulation. We have an open IND, and we are on our way into a phase 2b study. And this is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. COPD is the third leading cause of death globally. The market is huge. 4.8 trillion annually is the economic burden, and we believe that our peak sales will be around 5 billion. So I think that was it for me. And if you want to get hold of me, I will be at the dinner tonight as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So just we have a question here. You started off by stating that you aim for an exit within 5 years.
Yes.
What is the reasoning behind that timeline?
We want to have funding now for the 2B. We want to conduct the 2B study that will take 3 to 4 years. So that's why we say, and we think it is a clear milestone when we reach the proof of concept, have the dose finding reported, and then it would be either an M&A or an IPO. That is what we believe, because then we will need even further funding to be able to do the phase 3, which is more reasonable, I would say, a big pharma would do.
Mm-hmm. And have you started planning for large-scale production already?
Yes, we are doing. We have CDMOs in place, both for API and for tablet production and tablet development. Mm-hmm. So we have a tablet available. We have obviously not produced it yet because we will need the funding for doing 2B study, and it's too early to do the production.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a follow-up to that is, what is the production capacity?
I have no idea, but it's one of the big CDMOs in Europe. We are outsourcing it.
Yeah. I think we only have time for one more question. Is it correct that this will then be a second-line treatment?
Yes, because I think for patients having a COPD, they will always want a bronchodilator first, make it easier to breathe. Mm. This is a long-term and long-acting anti-inflammatory, reducing exacerbations. So you might not feel immediately it's helping you, but in the long run it will. So I think bronchodilators first, then we can come on board. And
will this somehow limit the target market somehow?
Not really. If you look at the GOLD guidelines, it's always will start with bronchodilators. I think we'd rather have a larger potential here because we can go both into the neutrophilic inflammation I talked about, where there is really nothing right now, but we can also be inhaled corticosteroid sparing, so we can take a piece of that cake as well, even though corticosteroids are very often used.
Well, thank you so much, Maria, for answering the questions and for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
We are good to start the last part of this first day of the Global Forum. It's the last but most exciting part, of course. And to start off this exciting part, I'd like to welcome to the stage the CEO of WntResearch, Per Norlén. Welcome, Per.
Thank you so much. So I'm Per Norlén, CEO of WntResearch, and we are a public biotech company with a drug candidate in clinical phase 2 for colon cancer. A disclaimer. The goal of WntResearch is to reduce mortality in colon cancer by reducing metastasis. And colon cancer is a very large indication, is one of the greatest killers, but in fact, mortality is quite low as long as it's localized. Once it's metastasized, it's very poor, with a very low 5-year survival. So clearly a medical need to reduce metastasis, and our strategy to this end is the Wnt pathway, or more specifically, Wnt5a. Wnt5a is an endogenous protein that protects against cancer. It reduces detachment of cells, so reduces spread of cancer cells. It reduces invasion into healthy tissue, and it also reduces the number of cancer stem cells. And the expression of Wnt5a differs quite a lot between tumors. If the expression is low, well, then you have a very poor prognosis. You release more cancer cells, more metastasis, and a shorter lifespan. If it's high, the opposite is true, less metastasis and a better prognosis. So obviously, we would like to increase Wnt5a, and there are clinical data supporting this. Here is a study demonstrating the difference in survival between colon cancer patients with low Wnt5a in tumors versus high Wnt5a. And you can see with the red arrow, sorry, that's not the pointer, that's quite a dramatic difference, from about 5 years to about 10 years. So you want to increase Wnt5a. Unfortunately, Wnt5a is not druggable. It's a large, sticky protein, very poor pharmaceutical properties. So, but we found a solution, FOXY5, which is a short fragment of Wnt5a, retaining all the positive effects and also much better pharmaceutical properties. It's been brought into development and into clinical phase 2. The clinical phase 2 trial was initiated and then paused. And I'd just like to give you some background, and it was due to some promising but unexpected findings. But first, some background on the study. It's 127 patients. It's a randomized trial, FOXY5 versus standard of care, and it's localized colon cancer. And the endpoint here was to look for relapse in cancer. It was paused for 2 reasons. The first is that after 3 weeks at the time of surgery, we identified a quite significant effect on the tumors. And also, it was observed that the study was clearly underpowered to demonstrate relapse after 2 years. So how is a study of 127 patients underpowered? Well, let's look at the design here. We start with the diagnosis, time 0. Then they are starting treatment with FOXY5 or get standard of care, which usually is no treatment. After about 3-4 weeks, there is surgery, complete resection of the tumors. You remember this is localized colon cancer. The surgery has a high probability to cure the patient. But we look for relapses, which do occur up to 2 years. The problem was there were very few patients relapsing. So clearly, we needed a much, much larger study for a longer time. But on the other hand, after 3 weeks, there was clear effect in the study. Let's look at that data, because it's quite amazing. First of all, there is reduced local invasion along nerves. It is a very common way for cancer to spread along infiltrating nerves. And you can see there's quite a dramatic difference. For more than 40% in the control group, there is 50 patients in the control group, and then there is 50 patients in the FOXY5 treated group, and it's dramatically lower after treatment with FOXY5. And the same was found for vascular invasion. And here it's an even bigger difference. And vascular invasion, just to put this data into context, this is an histological analysis. But this is very much comparable to what you see after chemotherapy. First-line chemotherapy for 6 weeks, a very large trial was conducted to demonstrate effect before surgery, and our data is actually clearly stronger after 3 weeks of FOXY5. So here seems to be a very significant effect. It's highly significant and clinically relevant. The study has been redesigned. Now the focus is just to look at 3 weeks and to concentrate on what happened before and up to surgery. Again, it's localized colon cancer, 80 patients, 40 plus 40. So it's a randomized trial. Again, it's blinded, so assessments will be blinded. Treatment duration, 3 to 4 weeks, that is until they do surgery. And of course, we want to look at the histology, but most importantly, we have also added radiology, so we can look for actual effects on tumor size, which is most important here. Design is very simple. Diagnosis, treatment 3 weeks, surgery, and then a follow-up, which is just to show that it's safe. So a very fast and short study, and this study will basically determine the fate of the company. We have already started. We have increased the a dose escalation part. First 4 milligram, that's double the dose, and then to 8 milligram, which is 4 times. Plus, we have increased the frequency to increase the drug load. Dose has been selected, it was found safe, and we have started the expansion phase. And we reported a couple of weeks ago that we included the first handful of patients, and recruitment is continuing. So this study, we have met our milestones this year, and the next milestone is a critical milestone. Towards Q4, we plan to present our first efficacy analysis. It will be a subpopulation of patients, but still it will basically determine whether we continue the trial or close down the company. Given the data we have, we think there's a high likelihood that we will get positive data, but that remains to be demonstrated. The full data will be presented end of next year, and we obviously, based on the initial efficacy analysis, hope to identify partners. It should be interesting for a partner. It's a very large patient segment. There are today no treatments approved for neoadjuvant before surgery in colon cancer, in localized colon cancer. So if it works, it will take a very large market share, and it could be significant sales. And quite obviously, if it works in colon cancer, it has a high probability of working in other similar situations, including breast cancer, prostate cancer, and rectal cancer. So just to conclude, we want to reduce mortality in colon cancer by preventing metastasis. To that end, we have a Wnt5a mimetic, FOXY5, and we already have data from clinical trials, a randomized clinical trial of more than 100 patients, demonstrating a very fast effect on tumors in these patients. We have a study, phase 2 study ongoing to confirm the data, and if it shows what we want to show, we think there's a very attractive case for a partner. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Per. So you started as a CEO here at WntResearch not too long ago. What are your thoughts on the FOXY5 project? What attracted you the most about this project?
First of all, it has objective clinical data. I think there's a lot of promise in biotech, but here we have objective data. It's randomized, and it has been assessed in a blinding fashion. So the histological data, although it's not clinical efficacy, it's very correlated to clinical efficacy. So I find that very intriguing. I think the other part is the sort of the binary situation the company is. It's a single drug company. We have this product. We have to show effect. If there's no effect, that's the end of it. If there's a good effect, that's, well, celebration, and we go forward.
Related to that, somebody would like to know what happens to the company, single asset, if the study fails.
Yeah, basically we will liquidate the company.
Yeah.
There are no backups today.
FOXY5, I believe, was also in clinical development 10 years ago. When does the patent expire?
Well, the first patent expires in 28, but there has been a new patent filed, and that expires in 41. So we actually have very good cover for the product for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. What are your personal thoughts on the ongoing phase 2 study?
My personal thoughts? Well, I mean, recruitment is key here, and it's always a challenge. We have started recruitment. It looks fine. We are not up to full speed yet. We have sites in a dozen sites or so in Spain, And then we have a handful of sites in Hungary. They are still discussing the terms of their agreements. We haven't got them fully up and running yet in Hungary, but we expect them to be in active recruitment stage within a month or so. But Spain is up and running all sites, so it's going pretty well. It can be even faster, and that's, of course, essential if we want to be able to present data at the end of the year.
What's your strategy to speed things up a little bit?
Well, it's to meet the investigators, and I was down last week, and so was our clinical head of the clinic, and we're down in March, and we will go down again in June and meet them again at ESMO GI end of June. So we try to meet them as often as they can handle it.
Well, speaking of meetings, could you elaborate a little on your partnering strategy and how that is going?
Yes, the partnering strategy is quite simple at this point in time. We have very interesting data. It's firm data, and partners, they want to see it, but it's not conclusive enough, and it's not clinical endpoint, so it's not enough to actually strike a partnership at this time. If we can confirm the data and also demonstrate, which it should be, coupled to a distinct reduction on CT, on radiology, then they are definitely eager to continue. So there is many companies that have seen the data and want to meet us again if we get positive data.
Well, you just mentioned radiology, and that you're measuring tumor size, correct?
Yes.
Well, why is that so important here?
Because tumor size is clearly coupled to relapse, and tumor size is also what guides. At the time of surgery, you look at tumor size, and then you decide whether it's T3, T4, how big it is, how much it has penetrated through the intestine. That decides on if you will get chemotherapy, how long you will get it or not. So basically, it has a direct correlation to if you get 6 months of chemotherapy or not, which is one endpoint you can look at, of course.
Good. That's all the questions for today. But thank you so much, Per, for your presentation and answering the questions.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Well, next we have our final expert insights session of the day, and the session is called Fusion Pharmaceuticals, from early VC investment to $1 billion deal. And our expert for this session is Johan Christensson, partner at HealthCap. Partner at HealthCap,
absolutely. And we can see a theme here that this session today started with a venture capitalist, and it almost ends with a venture capitalist. And if you don't remember anything about this, remember that senior life science venture capitalists are called Johan. So I was asked to talk about Fusion Pharmaceutical, which is a Canadian company. And so I will get into how we built Fusion, what Fusion is all about. But of course, I will try to highlight how we interacted, our role, and some learnings for this on this journey. So that's the ambition with this presentation. But I guess not all of you know HealthCap. So just a quick HealthCap in summary. We've been around for actually soon to be 30 years. So we have invested in quite a number of companies over these years. We have taken 47 companies public. And as I think many venture capitalists in life science in particular use the IPO as a financing event. It's not an exit. It's really a way to raise capital for the companies. You can see there also that I use the word unicorns. That's a trendy word that our tech investors very often use, and you can see it in papers. And then you may forget that we in life science, we also create unicorns. We have created 14. The latest one is actually out of here. It's Bone Support. It's one of our portfolio companies. It's become a unicorn, which means that they are valued above $1 billion. Bone Support is above $1 billion today. Maybe me being a physician and doctor, I think this is something which is as important as a return on investment if you are to work in this business. And actually 34 approved products, pharmaceuticals, during this time period that we have been around is actually 45% of all new approved products at FDA over the same time period, which also tells you that running business or drug development in small businesses like ours is actually a very efficient way to bring products to the market. Let's now move to the topic of today, which is then radiopharmaceuticals. And I, of course, then have a special focus on fusion pharmaceuticals. So I will give you a little bit about what radiopharmaceutical is all about and how and what fusion is doing, and then try to link a little bit of reflections from my behalf on this journey. We were very early, actually, in radiopharma. We invested already in a Norwegian company called Algeta in 2005, which we took public in 2007, and then the company was acquired by Bayer for $2.9 billion. At the time when we invested, I would argue that there were very few that understood the value and the potential of radiopharma, and the interest in investing in drug development using radioisotopes was very low. So we took kind of a little bit of a giant leap, put some risk in the thinking that if this works, it must be something worthwhile to invest in. Algeta, I would argue, is really kicked off the modern era of radiopharmaceuticals. And now it's one of the hottest area in the pharma industry. We are still active in the space. Apart from fusion, we are active in a company called Precirix, and another one in Germany called Arisium. So why radiopharma? Just to simplify it a little bit with this slide, it's basically about taking an isotope, define a linker, and link the radioisotope to a targeting molecule, which could be an antibody, a small molecule, or a peptide. It usually is an antibody. And you can compare it very much to what's called the ADC, antibody drug conjugate, which, if you compare the two areas, have a lot of similarities. It took a long time for ADCs to really become a commodity, and today is one also of the hottest area. If you see what big pharma is focusing on, most of big pharmas have ADCs in their pipeline. So rather than having a chemotoxin, you use an isotope, but in principle is the same thinking. Now, you saw there on this one, you have therapeutic emission, which is really the type of radiation from the isotope, which could be alpha or beta. Those are the most common. You also have gamma, which is mostly used for imaging, which is another very interesting aspect of radiopharmaceutical, because you can use the gamma connected to the same antibody, and you use that in order to get an image that your product find the right tumor, and you can identify then that you have the right patient to give the treatment. And then you shift the gamma to an alpha or beta, and then you have the therapeutic agent for the patient that you know have the target. So Fusion decided, and that was one of the reasons we invested, they decided to use alpha emitters. And there are some advantages, and this is still a debate, and you can use beta in some instances and alpha in other instances. But in the short version here is that it's higher energy with alpha, it kills tumor cells more efficiently, but also it doesn't travel, the radiation doesn't travel for a long distance, which means that if you get the radiation, the isotope, close to the tumor cell, you only kill the tumor cell. The radiation does not travel through the tumor cells into healthy tissue. So it's a very efficient way to kill tumors if you get it to the tumor. So a little bit then on the history here on Fusion and HealthCap. We were invited to invest in this company when it was created. It was created as a spin-out of an institute in Canada called CPDC. that had a lot of experience in chemistry, meaning that they understood the linker technology, they knew how to handle isotopes, but they never before had developed drugs, but they wanted to set up a company. They were looking for investors that had a knowledge in this space, and there were not that many. But they knew that we were early investors in Algeta, so even if this company was created in Canada, in Toronto initially, we were called and we were invited to invest. After quite quick due diligence, I must say, we understood that these guys were extremely skilled in the linker chemistry, which we have learned from Algeta is actually very tricky. They understood how to develop and produce and manufacture isotopes. So for us, it was quite clear that this was a very interesting potential company. So we joined already in the Series A in 2017. We were doing that together with J&J DC, which is kind of the corporate venture arm of JJ. And quite quickly we said that let's be a little bit bullish here. And now I come to some of the strategic decisions you have to make as an investor. Should we go just for one product and that would be good enough, because that was we doing in Algeta. It was enough with one product showing very good efficacy. Bayer bought it. Or should we actually here see it more as a platform and not just a kind of binary one product, will it work or will it not? So we were quite bullish, say let's do this for real. Let's do a fully fledged company with a pipeline that can go all the way. So we invited other investors already in the Series A, and we managed to actually attract a couple of US investors. So we had a reasonably good Series A, which is of course important. And then we continued. We worked closely. I was on the board from day one, and we managed to do a Series B. As you can see, we did an IPO in 2020. At that point in time, that was another very important decision. Should we go public or should we not go public? HealthCap, as you saw, has a tradition of taking companies public. We believe that's a very good way to do it, to raise money. But on the other hand, at this point in time, we were early on in clinical development. We had started to build a pipeline. We were in phase 1. As you know, in oncology, phase 1 is in patients, but still, we didn't really have very strong proof of concept data. Then you could argue, isn't that too high risk to go public? Because once you go public, you will start to be measured on clinical data. All the investors, and you guys know who are investors, what are you looking for? You're looking for, do you believe this will work? Well, you need to have some comfort. So maybe it was too early, but the market at the time, if you remember, 2020, there was basically no IPO window. But we managed to do that, and it was actually oversubscribed. So we believe it was the right decision because we financed the company, we secured that we have a long runway, even if we didn't have some very clear milestones in the short-term perspective. That became even more difficult because then you had the pandemic. And the pandemic really hit us when it comes to recruiting patients, get the clinical trials going. So we actually happened to end up in that scenario where we did not deliver to the market what we had promised, which was clinical data. So the share price was really, really suffering during this period, made us very nervous. But we managed to keep the thing going. We had a strong investor base, so we could raise money in consecutive pipes, and thereby pushing products. And that's another learning that I hope you share with me. In our space, I mean pharma and biotech, you cannot save money and at the same time build value. The only way to build value is to invest. It's the only chance to build value. So you have to look for possibilities to invest. So there is a rumor, as you know, and I know Johan shared this with me. He may not share everything I say, but this I think you share. The saying is, if there's money on the table, grab it. I think that's a learning, because dilution can be handled, in particular for management. But if you don't raise money, you don't build value. So let's see how this company now has developed. This is sort of what we decided. We decided that we should use the alpha, which are the smart bombs. We also decided, which was another very important decision to take, and that's a huge investment. But if you are to become a fully fledged company and also being attractive for a potential acquirer, one learning is that manufacturing, in particular these complicated areas like radiopharma, cell therapy, etc., to build your own manufacturing is actually extremely important. We took that decision, and we actually now have our own manufacturing facility. Now about data. I will come back to this and not dwell too much about science, but this actually is very important for where the company is today. This is just to show you a little bit on that we build a pipeline, and as you can see, it's quite a broad pipeline, which is of course attractive for potential acquirers. Now on this slide, you can see these are where the products that we had from the start. This one, which is now in phase 2, that was also a strategic decision. We said that due to the pandemic, we did not deliver milestone, we didn't deliver clinical data. And we started to see the whole radiopharma space was just growing. It was coming companies behind us, moving much faster. So we decided that one of the areas that really serve, where radiopharma potentially had a huge opportunity was in prostate cancer. So we actually in-licensed a product from academic group that already have some data, and that product could be immediately put into phase 2, and I will come back to that. The data with this product, and that this has now been shown, is that the whole area of prostate cancer and radiopharma has really been coming off. Novartis have acquired 2 companies, and in one of those companies, they were carrying a product called Pluvicto, which is for prostate cancer. It has the targeting molecule is PSMA. As most of you know, that's what you measure if you have prostate cancer. PSA is going up, and there's an antigen connected to this. So Pluvicto is today a $1 billion product, but you develop resistance, which is the classical thing you see in oncology. When you are on a treatment, suddenly it doesn't work any longer. What we can see by using an alpha emitter, Pluvicto is a beta emitter, coming back to where we started about this different mechanism. Using an alpha, you can see this is a resistant patient, and after 2 treatments, it's a complete response. So it's a very efficient product. Our own manufacturing was an important aspect, as I said, and which means that these are the different parts of the company that we have built. I see the time is running, so I jump to this one because just to summarize, because that's a time schedule which I think is important. Because we started, as I said, already in 2005/7 in Algeta, and that's really where it took off for radiopharmaceuticals. And after this, fusion was started. Endocyte, Advanced Alloxen were acquired by Novartis, so they went into the space. Later on, you saw the first product that really made a difference from a marketing point of view was approved. And just lately, last year, Race Bio, Point Pharma was acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb and Lilly. And as I already mentioned, Pluvicto became a blockbuster, $1 billion product. And now, and I guess that's within the title that Jonas gave me, how you can build a company from start to be actually a high value company. AstraZeneca has proposed to acquire the company for up to $2.4 billion. Why I say proposed is because you need to have a final agreement, of course, from shareholders. And guess what? The shareholders meeting started half an hour ago. So it may be so that there will be an acquisition. So I think I stop there. Then by just saying there are a lot of strategic discussion and decision points that you have to take to actually do a journey like this. But even if you don't do it as broad as this, to raise a lot of money, it boils down to some things that I think we all share in common. It's science-based. It's high-quality science. It's evidence-based. Science is driving this, and that's the most important part. The other thing is that you have to, again, be ready to see if there's a chance to raise money, you should do it, because that is really driving value. But then it really boils down to data, data, and data. So I'll stop there, and thanks for listening. And I will be around. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Johan. Very nice presentation. All right, so who's ready for some rock and roll? Well, to tell you all about that, I would like to welcome to the stage my co-moderator, Sonja Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Mike. Ooh, are you ready for the main event? No, seriously, it's quite a tough act to go up last. The energy is, you know, maybe going a little bit lower. Everybody wants to get to the dinner, maybe outside to have some air. Thankfully, we'll have some. Yes, please, sit down. I'll just stay here talking a little bit while we get the tables and things ready. No, but yeah, it's a title that demands a little bit like money, science and rock and roll. We'll do our best. And we'll keep it quite light. So, gentlemen, and on a little bit more of a serious note, you know, we talked a little bit, I think, in the beginning of the day about cultural clashes. There has been something about, oh, we Swedes are shy and maybe not the best of storytellers. And maybe you think, oh, okay, enough with this cultural clashes, but we love to talk about them. Right? Even in Scandinavia, we are super alike, Danes and Swedes, but the best thing we know is to talk about how very different we are. So I think we'll have some stories for you. And I mean, when you come to the global scene, it's also sometimes that you find yourself in unexpected situations, maybe even a cultural gap between you and the way business is conducted. So, my dear panelists, I'll introduce you. Here to my left is Ben Wu, your healthcare director at Agio Capital. Welcome. Thank you. And sitting on the far left here is Stefan Sandström, founder and CEO at the BioSector in Japan.
Thank you.
And Andreas Schmidt. I'll see if I can get all of this right. You're a PhD Senior Vice President, Head of Global BD at Singleron Biotechnologies, and founder and managing director at Springboard Health Angels, correct?
Yes, you got it all right.
Yeah, well, you can also, if you have a hard time remembering that, you can just say you're a scientist turned serial entrepreneur turned investor.
True.
Okay, so we'll start things off. What is the hardest thing for a Scandinavian, or maybe Northern European, person to overcome in order to make it on the global scene? Don't be so cordial. Please grab the phone, Andreas.
Of course, I'm not like directly from the Nordics, but at least from northern Germany. Hopefully that qualifies half. I think there are plenty of German cliches of being like too focused on quality and of getting things right. And I had the marvelous opportunity to start my first company actually as an immigrant entrepreneur in Singapore. Basically, my role was actually to not know about this cultural context and rather break things and build things up. And I think that's the major obstacle for Germans is like quality-driven, getting things right, making sure that the last check of everything is there. And rather adopting like a 80-20 or it's kind of right, let's move on.
Yeah, well, two German parents, I can relate to that. Stefan, as the only Swede and Scandinavian on the stage except for me, what do you think? What is the hardest thing for us?
So I have some pointers. So I call it the kindergarten teacher mentality. I think Swedish people should stop telling others what they need to do. It can be tedious. And also this perspective that you need to have, that Scandinavia, it is actually a tiny part of this world. It exists. We have had a very successful, what do you call it, social experiment that seems to go a little wrong now, but I hope it will come back stronger. So we don't need to talk about Sweden or Scandinavia or IKEA. People already know that they exist. So we can broaden our minds and look at the world for what the world actually is. I think that's important because it brings discourse into a higher level. And as you pointed out, salesmanship and presentation skills, talking in front of an audience, just we need to be better. And the only way to do that is to practice. Just go out there, challenge yourself, and see how you can learn. We have fantastic salesmen and saleswomen in Sweden, and learn from them. I mean, that's what we're here for, to do the best we can with what we have. And the last thing I would like to point out is that, I'm sounding very negative, but...
We just begun. You'll have some time.
Okay, so this is the thing about no, getting a no and getting rejected. It's like the worst fear that Swedish people have. But when you think of it from a different way, I think this is more logical. If someone says no to you or you say no to someone, you save everybody's time. Your time is saved if someone says no, because doing business with someone you don't like or that is not a good fit, it is going to end in disaster anyway. So it's better to stop it early than to hang on until the bitter disaster comes. And I like to think of it, as I live in Tokyo, I've been there now for 18 years. In metropolitan Tokyo, we have 40 million people. And since I'm a little bit of an eccentric, maybe 1% of the people there could be my friend. So if you translate 1% of 40 million, you end up with 400,000 people. That could potentially be a good friend. So say I can Google them and find a list of all these people. Okay, so I spend 10 minutes with each of them. And if I don't sleep and don't eat and don't do anything, I will need to do this for 75 years to just have a small talk with them. So imagine if I spend 1 hour with a person that is not ever going to be my friend, I have wasted the chance to meet 6 of these fantastic people. So that's how I think. I can say more, but I stop there.
Well, Ben, as we already said, of course, there are some stereotypes about Scandinavians, about Europeans. I think we know them. Germans, super efficient, super perfectionist. Swedes, very shy, very reliable. Do you find them accurate, or are these just in our heads?
I will address this from the receiving end. Like so when we are at the receiving end, you're comparing, okay, I'm a BD person in China, I talk to Europeans, I talk to Americans, I talk to other Asians, right? So my overall impression, I wouldn't know Nordic how it's very different from the rest of Europe. So Europe in general, I would say, you gotta be more confident. You have good stuff. You have better stuff than the US. Like, generally speaking. So why be shy? So we know how your competitors are selling their stuff. You can do the same. You can do better. Sometimes they overdone it. Like, so I think we are, I mean, especially talking about Asian and European culture, they're more similar than between Asia and Americans. Right? So very often we think the American party is overly aggressive. Right? Some of the CEOs, yeah, I'm not going to name who. So that can be. And the other point I want to raise is that you be more confident. And the storytelling part, which we have talked about several times today, is very important.
I mean,
Andreas,
maybe the one thing I truly admire, particularly in China, is speed. In every aspect. I mean, you said that earlier of like how fast was Shanghai, the new Shanghai, the Pudong built. But I mean, my second company got acquired now again by a Chinese company, and the speed of doing things. I mean, we launch products faster than I'm even aware that we launched them sometimes. And at my German side then bites on my teeth and say, did we do all the quality checks? And then I say, okay, we are now a Chinese company. We blast it out. We show we will improve it. We'll do that 3 times. And in the end, it's actually a very high quality product as well. Over the years, I got more playful with that. Like by now, if I present in Silicon Valley engineering from our company, I speak with particularly strong German accent. People get it. I want to highlight the quality. And afterwards, they laugh. They know I lived a long time in California. I don't need to do that. So,
yeah, I would completely agree. I think if you look at the China workforce, or at least for now, they are workforce on steroid. So you get an email up to them, 11 p.m., you get an immediate response. I do that too, right? So you can expect that. Speed. So when a business development person in China with a company, sometimes you get very frustrated about, okay, we will schedule a call 4 weeks from now between 1 and 2 p.m. Are you okay? We can do it tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm exaggerating a bit, but maybe not that exaggerating. But that's, I think, a little bit of a cultural difference, right? So China moves very fast. When you ask them to sign an NDA, they turn around within 24 hours. So that's the kind of speed and I think work cultural difference.
I'm sorry, do you relate to that, Stefan?
Well, yes. The Japanese mode of working is also 24/7, around 364 days per week, no, per year, sorry. And it is fantastic. You get this idea and you need feedback and you send it out on Saturday evening, just before you go to bed. And when you wake up in the morning, you have a reply. And this is something that some of my colleagues that also work in Japan, they've left Japan because they get heart attacks. They have to work all the time. The phone is always on. You're always on duty. I think that makes projects very smooth, and you don't stop because there is a roadblock somewhere. Projects run smoothly. Then there are other differences, but I will not dive into them.
Well then, Andreas, I would like to know, like, how much have your style changed? Because now you have been doing deals in Asia for a while, if you compare to when you started out.
I mean, as I said earlier, I have a more playful attitude to that. I listen more carefully. I don't assume that I see the world correctly through my German myself, but can actually switch a bit more and try to take advantage of these opportunities. I mean, the feedback I constantly give in Germany is we have to be faster. Like, forget for quality for once, but just get it done, get the investment done. As a one fun fact, selling my company Proteona, I had no intent to sell it to a Chinese company. I had a conversation with the CEO of Singleron, and after half an hour we figured out, hey, we are competing. How do we resolve that? After another half an hour we said, okay, it's a deal. You buy us, that makes sense for both. Within 3 months, we have done everything. Due diligence, like integrating the teams in different locations in the world, signing all paperwork, having an integrated company. Sure, afterwards, and I think that's, we were discussing that earlier, the Chinese mentality of signing something is, let's do this, let's figure out the rest later on. That end part of it, yes, we had to figure that out. But, well, that's fun part of it as well.
It's like Denmark and Sweden making business. Swedes love to plan it first. We come up with a plan and it'll take us a little time. We'll get there. With Danes, they like to jump ahead and then, we'll just change here and then we'll adapt some stuff and then everyone in Stockholm goes, please don't.
Yeah, I think another, practicality, a practical tip is that the other side of the phone, it's going to be different as time evolves. When you first contact a BD person, they may not be the best scientist to understand your science. They are thinking about, okay, why are you good? Why are you better than your competitor? What's the market size? Because in their mind, they're thinking about, I need to fill in this Excel sheet. I need to value your asset and need to explain to my boss why I would recommend you. But once you pass that, you start to talk to more senior people in the other company or scientists. They would have different concerns and different questions. So it's not going to be one size fit all. You need to think more about the audience for that particular call, what they are looking for, and whether they are very well educated to understand the science that you're talking about.
Let's go in a little bit deeper into that, and I think you can actually start out, Ben, and then we'll cover all the regions that you are representing in some ways. What is very important to remember when you are looking to take your company to China, making deals when you haven't done it before?
Yes.
Small question for you there.
Yes, I think if you are a company of 10 people, don't attempt it. Don't try to do that. That will distract you from what you really should be doing, your science, you're looking into your product development in Europe and US, big markets. I will always think that as much as possible, find a good partner to partner with, because they know the local regulatory environment, they know how to get the trial started quickly. That's not something you can learn. It's a very long learning curve and can be very painful. So I'll give you one example of a company that I have been working with. So they entered, it's a small rare disease company that's trying to launch a product in China. And they didn't know the local Chinese regulatory environment very well. So they were outsourcing their submission to a local Chinese CRO and basically only listen to what they are saying. So what's missing is that they have, timing-wise, because there is one question that holds them up, they missed the regulatory timeline for the submission of reimbursement for that year. So what that consequence is, then you do it next year, so you wasted completely a year. But then making it even worse is that, okay, next year there is going to be generic competition on the scene. You go or no go. So it is complicated. You don't know what you don't know. So it's always good to at least seek local input or a good partner. And of course, doing due diligence with your partner is another thing.
However, Ben, you also said in your keynote speak just that it's really good to have a partner, but that will also give you a different kind of headache. What did you mean by that exactly?
Another example. There are, at least at the height of the bubble, around 2020, 21, there are many local Chinese companies just want to get the deal done, so they increase the valuation so they can list. That kind of a partner is the partner you don't want because they have no intention to follow up anyway. And now we are seeing some of those actually happening, and trying to clean that up is messy. So a company may have submitted your file, then they're not following up. So according to the NMPA or Chinese FDA rule, you cannot change the submitting party once you submit it. You can retract it and resubmit, but you wasted the whole time. So that's the kind of thing that if you are with the wrong partner, then it's going to be very difficult to get out.
Stefan, I think you have something to say about this too, right?
Yeah, as I was talking about earlier, doing business with the wrong partner is always going to be bad sometime in the future. And I've seen so many examples of this. I have, of course, growing up, committed this sin, so to speak, of working so hard with a partner because I thought we will figure it out. But when you work with a company that is not interested in you or are not invested in bringing the business forward, it is just bad, simply. And speaking of China and the speed you have achieved there, in Japan, this is the worst thing about Japan. Everything is so slow. It is incredibly slow. So this was the first clash I had with the culture. Being entrepreneurially minded and having a little bit of ADHD, I want things to happen. And so I reached out to companies presenting my first client very proudly, and I behaved like an American guy on steroids, and nothing.
Give us an example. What was the energy level?
No, I won't. And because of NDAs, I can't tell you who they were. But when you speak to Japanese people, you need to speak in a calm way, and you need to allow things to take a long, long time. And my immediate idea was the Ents in The Hobbit, or the Lord of the Rings. They just go on forever and nothing happens. But the good thing with Japanese companies, I say all my clients that I always ever help in Japan, they will complain before we have a contract signed. They ask me to push harder or to make things happen faster, which is impossible. There are many reasons for this, but when a contract is signed, you have lightning speed. Everything works perfectly, and I have had no client ever complain about working with a Japanese company once the contract is signed. So then you have the speed. So getting there is the tricky part.
Yeah, we should all remember that the Ents did take over Isengard. So no, you'll make it in the end.
Yes.
No, but Andreas, and I think this question is for all of you that have done journeys, I mean, abroad and to new cultures. And what are some of the most unexpected, maybe weirdest situations you found yourselves in?
I share a story about sheep with you, and then tell you why that links to biotech. So it was a whole bus full of executives from various biotech companies in one bus driving through Germany, all from Singapore, on the way to Medica, biggest, the Düsseldorf exhibition, like gigantic. And all of a sudden they stopped in the middle of nowhere, and there was like large meadows and sheep. And all of them actually were super excited about that. And like there were a few Germans in it that they couldn't tell. Well, they are sheep and that's a meadow. And they were excited of like taking pictures, sending them back to their colleagues. And what I didn't realize, and should know better, of course, Singapore has one single farm. All food is imported. You don't have free landscape. It's because everything is built up and there are skyscrapers everywhere. And like this, the scenery was for them super impressive. And we didn't realize that people see something else, looking at the same thing. And basically we ended up in Medica, but it taught me a lot of important lesson. Also later on in business negotiations, people see other opportunities. They're excited about other things. And also in the deals that you present to a Chinese company, or as you earlier said, to like the same venture capital company, but to the office in China and in California, has to be different. And people are excited about different things. And since that was an experience actually with life science executives, I kept that picture in my mind when I negotiate in China, in Singapore, in California, in Boston, in Munich or Berlin.
Well, would you say then that people get excited over in Singapore versus US, for example, because people are curious to learn your insights?
Like Singapore, clinical validation. If you think, I mean, Singapore is amazing. I mean, both of my companies, I started there as a German, as an immigrant entrepreneur, and still I'm super connected to Singapore. And actually, I like how you can do business there. It's super fast, technology driven. The country is super supportive for entrepreneurship and for want to always have the coolest and newest tech. A lot of what we do is related to clinical trials and so on. Well, it's an island, 4.5 million people. Like for most of the diseases, you won't get enough patients together. So they will have to partner. They will have to go out. Like for very early projects, for startups, it's completely normal to say, and this is our rollout strategy. Like there are 3 people and they talk about rollout strategy. In the US, people would say, well, complete distraction, forget about that, cover the US market or cover the Chinese market, that's big enough. If you do that well, you will roll out in the rest of the world. In Singapore, that's the opposite. So they're super excited about, and you have links to Germany. I didn't know that, actually, that people saw me favorable because I could credibly say, and then we'll roll out the company to Germany and to California, I know whom to call. And I completely stood out there because I knew exactly which people to call. So, yeah, Singapore companies look for something else than the US company, than the German or the Chinese company.
Now we went serious again, but we promised you some rock and roll, and we have to deliver some of that, so I'll ask you again. When it comes to business and cultural clashes, what are some of the most memorable situations, maybe weird, maybe funny, you found yourself in? Stefan, we all want to hear about Japan.
Oh, where to begin? I mean, just trying to achieve something in Japan is a pain. So my first experience then, maybe it's not the funniest, but so the thing with Japan is that they are incredibly risk averse. They are so risk averse I can have allergies just thinking about it. The people who are anti-vaxxers, for instance, they are not wackos. They just don't want to take the risk now, because the risk that comes later is maybe because medical progress will make it not a dangerous disease. So they have this risk averseness that kind of hampers how they do things. And they have memories like elephants, meaning that if you start a company and you make a mistake and the company dies, you will forever be labeled someone who had poor judgment. Forever. So being a Japanese person means whatever you do, you don't make a mistake. So what we can translate this to in the larger companies is that the management and the board directors, they would rather that company sinks slowly than they take any kind of business risk. There are, of course, exceptions to this, but this is the standard way of operations in Japan. That's why there are so many companies that don't produce any profits. And from the entrepreneurship point of view, coming with this backpack, of course, it's very difficult to be an entrepreneur in Japan. But they are slowly changing. The younger generation are accepting that you need to take risk. Still, the society doesn't accept people who make failures or mistakes, because it always will come down to you having poor judgment. Everyone will say, we told you so. And so the only good thing for me then, or many good things, but being a foreigner, it is okay to make a mistake because I didn't know better. And it's lovely. And so I will encourage anyone, if you want to be a rock star that we talked about in Japan, allow yourself to make mistakes. People will forget them because you're not Japanese. It's brilliant and lovely. So thank you.
So I would love to connect to that directly. So my first company in Singapore started like right after my PhD, and then we had first good results, and then there was no lab space for early startup companies that time, 2009. So all the incubators, none of that existed yet in Singapore. So we had to move the company to somewhere to hire people to have them work. And so I couldn't find anything, or we didn't have enough money. So at some point, I went to one of the professors we worked with. I took some tape and labeled actually like 2 benches and said, I want to rent this space from you and run the company there. The university put a lot of energy and also resources and money into that, otherwise we will die. The professor said, well, you can put tape there, but this will not go nowhere. I went to the dean. I later went to the president of the National University of Singapore and told them, well, you put so much resources into our company. We can't move anywhere. This has to be resolved. And he was laughing at me. I rented that space in that university because I made a good point. Of course, I broke all the rules that everybody was laughing about me. There was no bad intent. It was later actually mentioned by the vice president of the country, Singapore, as an innovative idea of starting incubators.
A good thing to be German in Singapore sometime. Ben, do you remember a time where you felt a little lost in translation?
I think well, I wouldn't say that's actually in our culture, probably. People come first. Right? The people connection, you can't replace it with just video calls, right? And of course, in Asia, that means you go meet them in person and drink a lot with them. Right. So that's like 54% alcohol, rice wine, and then until you're completely drunk, and then you're a friend forever. So that piece, I think, it's always true. Like,
but as a Scandinavian, you should see this as an opportunity to come to China, right? There are some things you can already do well. Covering Germans as well.
right.
Sorry.
Do you have a response? No, no, please, go on.
So I have been drinking a lot, and I'm still standing here with a damaged liver. But I mean, people connection is very important, no matter at whatever level.
Do you ever felt too challenged that way?
I try to pretend I drink sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, doing business in Japan involves a lot of drinking. And so they have two types of meetings. You have the formal meetings, and those are all about harmony. All the things we agree upon are reiterated, and you should leave the formal meeting feeling very good. And then we have the informal meetings, and that's where business is done. And at the end of the night, you remember some of the early things you talked about in the evening, but it's also due diligence, it's also building relationships. But business is done usually in bars.
Do you also smoothly drink water, pretending it to be something else?
No.
How do you do that, Ben?
After everybody else is drunk, they don't know what I'm drinking.
I think that is a perfect end to this discussion and smoothly transitioning into what will happen next. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us, and I'll look forward to hearing more about you guys tomorrow. So thank you, Ben Wu, Andreas Schmidt, and Stefan Sandström, everyone.